Hello everyone, this is the Theoretical Doctor and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is a series on the chapter Transport in Animals and Plants of Chapter 8 of the STPM Semester 2 Biology series. Check out the full playlist on my channel. If you want access to flashcards on this topic and other videos, do click the link below. It is available on my website as well as slides on this topic. In this video, we will be starting on the structure of the mammalian heart, more specifically the human heart as well as the human circulatory system. In this video, the subtopics we will be focusing on will be the structure of the human heart, types of blood vessels and their differences, and the mammalian double circulation. Structure of the human heart. These are both the structure of the human heart. On the left, over here, you have the human heart if it is viewed from the anterior position, meaning the front. And on the right, this one, you have a cross-sectional view of the heart, meaning if you were to cut over here and open up, you will see this part. So I'll talk a bit about the structures found in the human heart. Alright, so before I begin, this part over here refers to the right side of the heart and this one the left side. So this is the aorta, and the aorta has three branches. You have the right common carotid artery, the left common carotid artery, and the left subclavian artery. Okay, this is the pulmonary trunk, and the pulmonary trunk will then branch out to the pulmonary arteries. So on the left side, you have the left pulmonary arteries, and over here you have the right pulmonary arteries. Now this one and this one, like a pipe, it's the vena cava. So the top part is the superior vena cava, and the down part, the lower part, is the inferior vena cava. This one over here is the right atrium, and this is the right ventricle. This one is the left atrium, and this one is the left ventricle. On the surface of the heart, you will find these blood vessels, and these are the coronary arteries. They supply blood to the heart. So if you do a cross-sectional view and you open it up, this is how it will look like. So you have the aorta and there are three branches. This one is the vena cava, so it will transport blood back to the right atrium. This is the right atrium, and then blood will flow into the right ventricle. In between the right atrium and the right ventricle, you have this flap, and this one is the tricuspid valve. This one over here, in between the pulmonary trunk and the right ventricle, you have the pulmonary valve. And this part over here where blood fills, that's this one. This is the pulmonary vein. So blood will come back here and it will enter the left atrium and then the left ventricle. In between the left atrium and the left ventricle, you have the mitral valve, and then you have the aorta. So in between the aorta and the left ventricle, you have the aortic valve. So the blue represents the deoxygenated blood, okay, before it goes into the lungs to be oxygenated, and the red represents the oxygenated blood after it has come back from the lungs and is back into the heart and is ready to be pumped throughout the whole body. So take a moment to pause the video to go through the structures found here. It's important for you to be familiar with them because in the subsequent topics we will be talking about the functions of the structures a lot, especially the valves involved when we enter into the cardiac cycle. So the heart is made up of myocardium. Myocardium refers to the cardiac muscle, and whereby the cells are known as myocytes. There is a layer which surrounds the cardiac muscles, which is the pericardium. So over here, you have the surface of the heart. There is like a membrane that's covering the heart. That's called the pericardium. So the heart is made up of four chambers consisting of two atria. You have the right atrium and the left atrium, as well as two ventricles, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So this permits the separation of oxygenated blood, the red one, from the deoxygenated blood. You see, there's a separation actually. And there are two pumps with different pressure systems. You have the pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary circulation meaning the deoxygenated part, whereby deoxygenated blood from the body is pumped into the vena cava, and from the vena cava it goes into the right atrium, down to the right ventricle, into the pulmonary trunk, and finally through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. So that part refers to the pulmonary circulation. And the systemic circulation is when blood flows back from the lungs into the left atrium, and then from the left atrium to the left ventricle, from the left ventricle into the aorta and throughout the whole body. So that's the systemic circulation. Now what's the difference between pulmonary and systemic circulation? For pulmonary circulation, circulation, the pressure is lower because deoxygenated blood is pumped into the lungs to be oxygenated. Whereas in the systemic circulation, higher pressure is needed because oxygenated blood is pumped throughout the rest of the body. So in pulmonary circulation, lower pressure is needed because the distance from the heart to the lungs is short compared to like if you were to pump blood throughout the whole body, you need a higher pressure because it's the whole body. So imagine if blood is pumped under high pressure into the lungs, which is by the way such a short distance, it can cause pulmonary hypertension, and in the long run it leads to Eisenmenger syndrome, whereby the person eventually will require a lung and heart transplant. But that's just extra information for your syllabus. This is sufficient. So there is a septum. This part here refers to the septum, and the septum separates the right chamber from the left chambers. So what's the function of the septum? It prevents the wave of excitation passing directly from atria to ventricles. The delay prevents the atria and ventricles from contracting at almost the same time because you need the atria to contract first, then the ventricle. And if you know the sound of the heart, if you were to auscultate, meaning if you were to listen with a stethoscope, it's lub dub because they're contracting at different times. They're not contracting at the same time. The heart functions and pumps with the coordination of the electrical wave, which we will learn in the subsequent topic. So it's the transmit of electrical impulse, which starts from the atrium and then travels down. So I'll explain more about that in the following video. So anyway, the delay prevents the atria and ventricles from contracting at almost the same time, and this allows blood from the atria to flow into the ventricles, because if they were to contract all at the same time, blood just can't flow. So you need blood to come from the atria into the ventricles, and then from the ventricles into the subsequent blood vessels. So the left ventricle, this one, is thicker and more muscular than the right ventricle. This side here is thicker. Why? Because the left ventricle has to pump blood into the systemic circulation, which is throughout the whole body. So higher pressure is required. And in order to generate that very high pressure, you need more muscles. You need to be stronger. So the right ventricle, this one, pumps blood to the pulmonary circulation, meaning to the lungs, and therefore lesser pressure is needed because it's nearer to the heart. And you have the vena cava, which is the superior and inferior vena cava. The one on top refers to the superior vena cava, and the one at the bottom refers to the inferior vena cava. So the function is it carries deoxygenated blood from the body into the right atrium of the heart. And then you have the pulmonary arteries, this one. The word artery refers to going away from the heart, meaning the blood is going away from the heart. So pulmonary arteries, because it's carrying blood away from the heart, right? So the function is it carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. And then you have pulmonary veins, this one. The word vein refers to coming back or going back to the heart. Just like vena cava, vein, it carries blood back to the heart. Same thing with pulmonary vein, it carries blood back to the heart. Take note that I'm saying blood back. I'm not saying deoxygenated, I'm not saying oxygenated, I'm saying blood back. Do not remember the vessel by the term oxygenated or deoxygenated because you can get confused. Just remember artery, it carries blood away from the heart, and vein, it carries blood back to the heart. So pulmonary veins, they carry oxygenated blood, red refers to oxygenated blood, from the lungs to the heart into the left atrium. Then you have the aorta, this is the aorta. They transport oxygenated blood from the heart to other parts of the body. And then you have the atrioventricular valves, or short AV valves. They consist of tricuspid or bicuspid. Bicuspid, another word for it is mitral valve, this one. So this is the tricuspid and this is the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. The function of them is to prevent backflow of blood into the atrium. Valves, the meaning of valves actually is to prevent backflow of blood. So you have valves in the lymphatic capillaries, you have valves in the veins, and you have valves in the heart. And the functions of them is all the same. You just want to prevent the backflow of blood. You don't want blood to go back to where they came from. Then you have the chordae tendineae, and these connect the AV valves to the papillary muscle to prevent valves from inverting into the atria. If you notice, like, they are facing a certain way, so they need to maintain facing that way, because if you do not have chordae tendineae, they can go back, they can face the other side. So that chordae tendineae are holding the valves in place at that position. Then you have the papillary muscles, and they function to contract when electrical impulse are being sent, and the papillary muscles will tighten the chordae tendineae and pull on the AV valves over here, preventing the valves from inverting when that happens. Next, you have the semilunar valves. Short would be SL valves, and they consist of the aortic and the pulmonary valve. So this is the pulmonary valve and this is the aortic valve. So these two over here refers to the semilunar valves, the SL valves. So they prevent the backflow of blood into the heart because they're going out of the heart, and they prevent the backflow of blood back into the ventricles. Then you have the SA node, and the SA node acts as a pacemaker, and the SA node can be found over here at the right atrium. They act as a pacemaker and initiates the generation of electrical impulses for rhythmic contraction of heart muscles. So the heart will pump according to where the impulse is being generated, and it will first be generated at the SA node, which is over here, then it will travel down. I will mention more about the generation of electrical impulse for the heart in the following video. And then you have the AV node, and the AV node conducts electrical impulse from the SA node to the ventricles of the heart. It's basically like a second checkpoint like that for the electrical impulse. SA node, where the electrical impulse first starts, is for the contraction of the atria, and then when it goes to the AV node, it will channel the electrical impulse to other parts, but basically it is for the contraction of the ventricles. For the ventricles of the heart, for ventricular contraction. In other words, ventricular systole. So you will learn more about this ventricular systole, ventricular diastole in cardiac cycle, and that will be in the following video. Then we move on to the types of blood vessels and their differences. So blood vessels to remember that are important for you to know, the category would be arteries, capillaries, and veins. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So for arteries, the function of artery is to transport blood away from the heart. They will branch into smaller vessels called arterioles. They're smaller version of arteries basically, and the function is to transport oxygenated blood except pulmonary arteries, because if you remember, pulmonary arteries, right, you see blue, it refers to deoxygenated blood, but because it is transporting blood away from the heart, that's why it's pulmonary artery. Therefore, the function of arteries is to transport oxygenated blood except pulmonary artery, because pulmonary artery will transport deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle into the lungs to be oxygenated. Now the walls of the arteries are thick and muscular, and they have more smooth muscles and elastic tissue. The walls can be stretched and recoiled, and arteries can also constrict, meaning to become smaller. In terms of the size of the lumen, it is small, and they have no valves except the semilunar valves in the aorta and pulmonary artery, only those places. Otherwise, generally, arteries do not have valves. The blood in the arteries, they do not move like continuously, they actually move in pulses under high pressure. So after arteries, they will branch into arterioles. Then you have the capillaries. So capillaries, the function is to connect arterioles to venules, and it represents the site for gaseous exchange of respiratory gases, nutrients, or waste. They have the thinnest wall, they're one cell thick, and there's no muscle tissue, basically just for any form of exchange. The capillaries cannot constrict, and they have the largest lumen. And then veins. The function of veins is to transport blood back to the heart, and they will branch from, not to. Remember, arteries, they will branch into, but veins, they will branch from. They will branch from smaller vessels called venules. Their function is to transport deoxygenated blood except pulmonary vein, because pulmonary vein, if you can see here, they go back into the left atrium, the red color one. They transport oxygenated blood from the lungs back into the heart. So therefore, veins generally transports deoxygenated blood except pulmonary vein. They have a thinner wall, thinner than artery, and is less less elastic and smooth muscle fiber than the arteries. They have less smooth muscle and they are less elastic. They cannot constrict. Unlike arteries, they can constrict. They have a larger lumen, but not the largest. Of course, the largest would be capillaries, and there is presence of valve, and these valves prevents the backflow of blood because the blood pressure in veins is low, okay, as compared to the arteries. It does not move in pulses, and the blood flows under lower pressure than arteries. So this is like just a brief overview of how the blood will flow. So from the arteries, they will flow into the arterioles. From the arterioles into the capillaries, then after that gaseous exchange occur, exchange of nutrients and waste, and then they will branch into smaller veins. You have the venules, and from the venules, they'll all come together to the veins. Lastly, you have the mammalian double circulation. So mammals have double circulation. You have the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation refers to the circulation, the blood circulation from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart again. Whereas systemic circulation refers to the blood from the heart to all of the body. So this is an example. From here to the lungs, it's pulmonary circulation. But if it's from here to the whole body, then it's systemic circulation. So blood enters the heart twice during one complete circulation, which is from the rest of the body and from the lungs. So double circulation. It is also a closed circulatory system. So the circulatory system is closed, whereby the blood flows through the blood vessel and does not enter the body cavity. It's all confined within the pipes. So this allows for faster transport of substance to different parts of the body. So pulmonary circulation, the right side of the heart pumps the oxygenated blood from, not to, I made a mistake here, from other parts of the body to the lungs. And the oxygenated blood flows back to the left side of the heart. For the systemic circulation, the left side of the heart pumps oxygenated blood to other parts of the body, and deoxygenated blood returns to the right side of the heart. If you've reached this point, thank you very much. Hit the like button if you found it helpful, as it does help in reaching out to others as well. To support my channel by pressing the subscribe button so I will know, and it gives me motivation to continue producing content like this in the future. And finally, share this video to those who might find this helpful. I'll see you in the next one.